speaker is Brad Parker. Brad is a prolific political, social, and cultural writer and speaker. Parker has worked extensively on copyright and net neutrality issues. I know this was an issue that we brought up in the Canyon Country Advisory Committee, and we found that some of the candidates didn't even know what it meant. But we want to let you know that he is a recording artist, a songwriter, a producer, and musician, and I never thought to ask him to play when I invited him to come. So you can blame that one on me. Parker's music has earned him numerous awards in countries around the world with sales in the millions. In America, he has hit country song Nobody's Gonna Rain on Our Parade, and it was recorded with Kathy Mattai, earned him a BMI Awards as a songwriter and a publisher, as well as a BMI Millionaires citation for over 1 million broadcast performances. Brad has published 2 books, Left Turn Only, Dispatches from the Progressive Underground, and 100 Days of Poetry. Brad is also the director for the Center for Progressive Economics, and that is one of the reasons that I invited him to come out to Santa Clarita, because a lot of people are not familiar with us because we're not exactly on the beaten path. But Brad, can it give you more details than what I just gave you?
Thank you, Minerva. Thank you, Minerva. Great to be here. Actually, I've come out here a lot. Both of my, two of my kids went to Cal Arts. My daughter Saida and my son Abraham. So this neck of the woods is, see you, Cindy. The neck of the woods is very familiar to me. I am a rock and roll guitar player. This is my Clark Kent outfit. Because you can't do, people say, why do you wear a suit and tie when you do politics? I said, because I can't wear the clothes I wear when I'm playing guitar. It would be confusing to people. No, I think politics deserves a certain amount of respect because, as we've all seen with all the dysfunctional politics that we have today, we're not being well served by people that can't respect their office and respect their constituents and get some things done that we really need done. I can't remember in my lifetime a lower percentage of people admiring Congress. I find it's alarming, actually, when that many people feel like they're not doing anything for us. And I think one of the things that the current topics that trips people up is economics. I'm a real progressive Democrat, a longtime Democrat. I never voted for a Republican. Sorry, Tony, but it's okay. But I like what you had to say about reaching across the aisle. And when I was writing my book on progressive politics, I wrote some articles on economics from a social point of view. Things like preserving and enhancing Social Security and Medicare and those kinds of things. And I ran into Mark Pash. My dad was a CEO of many companies, and I was raised in a very conservative Republican household in which economics was impressed upon me, ran the world, and that's what we should talk about the most. But I never met a Democrat, let alone a progressive Democrat, who had an economic formula and theory that could cross the aisle and become a win-win for everybody. An economic theory where everyone across the spectrum, from rich to poor, would benefit from these kinds of programs. And so the last third of my book, Left Turn Only, was actually, I wrote it with Mark on progressive economics. Progressive economics is nonpartisan. It's not about Democrats and Republicans, left and right. It's also not about young and old. It's not about gender politics. It's not about any of the demographiers that separate us. It's about what unites us. And that we can't have a quality economy without quality customers. And I'm going to tell you, I think you're in for a treat. I don't know how much you know. I don't even know if any of you know the difference between fiscal and monetary policy, which I did not when I first met Mark. But open your mind. He's got some amazing ideas about how we could rework macroeconomics for America and the world and help everybody. It's amazing. When you hear that, especially if you hear somebody in politics like myself, it's like, yeah, oh, right, that's just a campaign slogan. But trust me, whatever you hear tonight is going to be great, but go to the website, cpe.us.com, educate yourself on what the world would look like if it was a win-win for everybody in economics. And without further ado, I want you to introduce the founder of Center for Progressive Economics, Mark Pash.
Thank you, Brad. I'm not running for office, so I did that in 1996, and nobody knew what I was talking about. So I says, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Okay, so I'm getting the age now that I have to have some notes so I don't get lost. And Tony's going to be answering some questions. What I'm going to do is some housekeeping. I'm going to talk for about 10, my hour talk's going to take 10 or 15 minutes. So obviously I'm going to highlight. Then I'm going to open up some question and answers because I know you're going to want to have some questions. And then after that, I'll sit here as long as you want to talk about economics, and Tony will sit over there, and you can talk to your next congressman about your favorite thing. Yeah. So you noticed I do not talk about politics, fairness, moral. They're all valid arguments, but I want to talk economics, because if you get the economics right, then the other ones are just validated. We have all the solutions. The solutions are out there for every one of our problems. I'll give you some examples of how it can be solved. The problem is we can't implement it. And we can't implement it because of the proper economics, okay? We have the solution, and it's money. Now, the big topic is going to come in the end, but I want to hit some smaller topics first. And that is, and I call it the business right, Tony. That's a lot of businessmen where I live, I'm a certified financial planner. 75% of my industry is Republicans. And of course, I grew up in business, and they think about economics on a business basis. Let's make some money. It's called microeconomics. It's a good topic, and it should be learned, but it has really not too much to do with macroeconomics, which is I want to have a quality economy, okay? Because what happens is the word labor and employees is a micro term, not a macro term. A macro term is customer, client, consumer, and citizen, okay? So as a businessman, I don't want to pay my employees that much. And of course, you saw all the major corporations go to Asia for 71 cents an hour back in the last decade. But I want to have, as a businessman, a lot of people coming into my store. I want to have well-paid customers and clients coming into my practice or my store, right? So there's a conflict there. And there's a couple solutions to it, and I won't get into it right now because we don't have the time, but one of the solutions is there's no competition, there should be no competition based on basic wages or limited competition, because they have to be paid. We should compete about everything else, even flexibility of labor, but not the amount that we're paying our customers and clients, because I want them to come back into my store. Okay, purely economic reasons. Okay, macro and macro and micro. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is we hear this term, especially on the right a little bit, called redistribution. Okay, redistribution is not redistribution. Say I'm redistributing. I'm taxing people and redistributing down below. And that is correct, but it should be called recirculation. Better economic term. So when you see somebody say redistribution is bad, it's not redistribution. I'm going to tell you, us capitalists get it right back. What happens to that redistribution? Okay? Comes right back in my store, and I get richer. Okay? So it's recirculation is the proper term. Okay? And if you start using recirculation, then we start developing these terms that promote proper. What's the #1 recirculation program in the United States? Anybody know? Everybody over 65 gets it. Social Security. It's not the best in the world, but it is a recirculation program from the workers to their parents. Okay? That's the biggest one. Now, the next topic I'm going to talk about is the other solution is money. And I'm going to talk about money, and I'm going to give you a little quote, because I'm only going to spend 10 minutes and hopefully this later. There's no such thing as a national debt. It is not a debt. Okay? We'll never pay it back. When was the last time we paid back the debt? Anybody know? What about anybody that's been to my lectures? Who was president when we last paid it off?
Lincoln.
1835. Who was president? Andrew Jackson. Last time we paid it off, it was zero. Okay? The national debt never has to be paid off. What happens to that debt? If we never pay it off, a debt is something that has to be paid off. So it's not a debt.
Recirculate to the future.
No, here's what happens, okay? The Federal Reserve Bank in New York, okay? The Federal Reserve Bank in New York takes a finger and presses a computer and creates money and pays it off. They call it quantitative easing, but quantitative easing is a more broader term. It's called monetarizing the debt. So it's a way of doing it, okay? Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm a foodaholic, and if you don't finish the food, I eat it. So please, or take it home with you if it's not there. Okay? So money is the key answer. Now, what is that is the second largest input of money. Where is the first? Where does money come from mainly? Anybody know? Somebody that's been to my lectures? Okay. Banks, commercial banks. Go. There's a thing over there. When you make a loan in a bank, okay, they don't loan out your deposits. They create money out of thin air, and they're the majority of the people. So when they're not lending, there's no money in the economy. 2008, they're lending a little bit now. That's why it's slow. Money is the lifeblood of an economy, and when it's scarce, okay? So the banks are the major source, and somebody has to go into debt in order to get money in the economy. And I say, why? Where is it written? I know it's not written in the Bible. Or is it written in the Constitution? No. There's no reason why people have to go into debt to get money into circulation. It's way to the bankers. So the Republicans say the sucking sound is taxes. It's not. It's the deficit spending actually goes back out, okay? The sucking sound is the interest you're paying on something that costs nothing to make, okay, that goes to Wall Street or the commercial banking system. So they create money out of thin air at no cost, and they charge you 5% or 4% or what are the interest rate. And they make a lot of money. That's why they own a lot of things, okay? There's no reason that they have a monopoly on the creation of money. It should be a public, and it's in our Constitution, Article 1, Section 5. Now, we have on our website, we have our cards. If you don't remember our website, just come and get it from me or on the table. Go look under the big one, monetary reform. And so what happens out there, and if you see this is global now. We want to think of economy as global now, good, bad, or indifferent, okay? If you notice in the political world, you see the left win, then the right win. This is not just the United States. Then the left win, and the right win, because they're voting mainly how well the economy's doing, how well their standard of living is doing. Do they have opportunity? Even the Arab Spring was caused by that. I have no opportunity. And the reason that they're voted out of office is they're not in control of the money. The private institution of the Federal Reserve is, and we have to go into debt. The system doesn't work. It collapses every so often. Major collapses or minor collapses. And it causes inequality because you can't get a loan unless you have money. You have to have collateral most of the time, or car. Okay? Then fortunately we have credit cards. So it's money that counts, and it's not distributed. It should not be in private hands. The distribution should be in private hands, and the distribution should be multiplied, and you'll find that on my website. Very important factor, because those guys arguing tax and spending is irrelevant. They can't tax enough or cut spending enough to pay off $18 trillion of national debt, because that's how they get money into the system. And why should the federal government have to owe money, okay, when they can just create it. Okay? As long as they don't create too much. Now let me give you an example how it solves all our problems. Okay? Because we're right here in California. Okay? We have a drought a little bit up here, don't we? And we got a proposition that won't solve the problem. And how can we solve this problem up there? By the way, 70% of our water plus is caused by agriculture. We all know that, right? Not our cities, the drinking and, cut your showers down and your lawns. Okay, that's 20% or something. There's no drip irrigation. They call it micro irrigation. That's the first thing. Throughout the state, why? They don't want to invest the money. Okay? Why? Because capital is expensive. Well, if we have a national problem, all we have to do is lend them the money. Okay? It's not a tax, it's not a spend, it's not on the budget. We lend them the money. We give them a 30-year loan at 1% that doesn't start paying, okay, until they go into operation. You'll have these farmers, large and small, line around the block to install micro irrigation. Israel is basically 100%. They live in a desert. They're 100% micro, okay? I don't know if 100, maybe 99, okay? And it's the capital, it's the money, okay? But the private system has to make their 5% instead of 1%. The payment on that mortgage for that equipment is substantially less than their cost of water. Forget about the environmental damage it does. Okay? So they'd be lining up around the block because they're going to make money, okay, on something that costs zero to make and is not scarce. Money is not scarce. This is all it takes to make money, $1. Push that little computer keyboard. Anybody fly into LAX and look down? Okay? And you start out in Palm Springs area and there's tons of industrial buildings. How many solar on those industrial buildings in Los Angeles, the sunniest place in the country, even over Florida? How many? Everybody noticed? I found there's 2 out of thousands. 2. Now you fly into Portland and there's quite a bit. And they have no sun. Okay? You fly into Germany. It's even worse than Portland. They're all solar. Okay? Well, I asked the Manufacturing Association, why aren't they putting it on their roofs? It says it doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make economic sense because the money is too expensive. The capital is too expensive for these businessmen. Remember, they're looking at the bottom line. But if I give them a 1% 30-year loan, remember, I don't have to tax for it. They will be around the block because the payment is so much lower, okay, than the electricity bill. Then they send the power back to the DWP or wherever they're, Southern California Edison. They make money. They'll be around the block doing it. What happens when you go around the block? What do you have to watch out for? Excess inflation or gouging. So you have to control the volume of money that goes in a particular area, or you have to have some price controls. But remember, solar is in a depression. They're not selling enough, so sales are down in solar. No reason except the people that control the money want to have their portion, and it just gets excessive. So the real answer and the real debate in Congress should be on the monetary system, not on the tax and spend fiscal system. Have you heard any debate on it? That's my goal, and encouraging Tony to do it too, to start the debate, because it is the answer, okay? This tax and spend answer is not a yes on the 1/10 of 1% or the 2/10 of 1%. You want to make sure the income taxes are high enough. They avoid it anyway because they got a lot of good taxes, got a lot of good accountants, and a lot of good CPAs, okay? And there's ways around that, okay, especially in the corporate tax, okay? So the answer is the monetary system, not the tax and spend, okay? Otherwise, they're going to keep going around in circles, and they'll elect right, and then they'll elect left. Okay? Now, everybody's got that in a few minutes, okay? Now, I try to do it through examples. There's a couple other things in my website that describes other things that could be paid and how you solve the wage problem and the minimum wage problem and all that. It's all there. And you can call me or email me on anything. So now I'm going to open up for questions, and then I'll sit here and talk after I open up for general questions. Then I can sit here and talk, and then Tony wants to take some questions back on the bench over there, and you can talk to your next congressman. I'm trying to get him to one of the people to start a debate. There is, they call it the monetary reform movement. It is out there, okay, and there's a lot of different things to go, different solutions to this problem, but it's not even debated, okay? It's not even debated, and it's the key to the economy. It's called money. Pretty simple. Most people don't even know where it comes from. Okay, questions? Yes?
And piggybacking on what you just said, we don't know where it comes from. That's my question, and any question is not bad, I understand, but I'm not an economic person. I'm other things that probably you wouldn't know about. So my question to you is, when you said the creation of money, what is the basis and what exactly is the creation of money? Because we know that there's not enough gold that backs up all the money that is being produced, and why and where, and if somebody really doesn't know, I'd like to know creation of money.
Okay, the creation of money comes into two parts. Number one, it's all fiat money. There is no backing to any money anymore.
No.
It's just, it's all digital now. Most of our money is in the computer. It's not cash in your pocket. It's the computer. It's digital, okay? So what does it cost to make a digital dollar? What, okay? So the banking system, and I'm not going to get you in the details. I got books to read, and they guarantee to put you asleep, and you don't want to know it, okay? The banking system, through its loan process, and all this regulation that looks like it's hidden, and you don't understand, is strictly a way of creating money. So when a bank, all the banks, okay, the commercial banks, Wells Fargo, when they make a loan, they put out new money. When you pay off your loan, it reduces the money supply, okay? Then deficit spending by Congress is a lesser one. That deficit has to come where they borrow from the federal, they put out treasuries, they sell it, so people buy it, so that's old money, but then the Federal Reserve retires it by creating new money. So when they buy treasuries on the open market, it's with new money. And that's what they call quantitative easing, is today's modern term, which means they're borrowing. So those are the two ways, and everybody's that way. Okay. Now the only objection people have, and I have 13 points, is, oh well, Mark, isn't this going to be too inflationary? And the answer is no, but you have to watch out for excess inflation and you have to manage it properly. Okay. But this century, under the central banks, which is the Federal Reserve, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, we've had more inflation than we did in the 19th century. So all the hyperinflation we've had have been under this debt process in Germany and Zimbabwe and things. So basically that's the two-way that we get fiat money. There's no banking, it's just a rule of law. Okay?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes.
I would like to get back to recirculating money.
Mm-hmm.
It seems in the last several years that there hasn't been as much recirculating, because a lot of people at the top seem to have so goddamn much money that they can't possibly spend it. They send some of it overseas, they hide it, they do all sorts of great things with it. But without a middle class, a very strong middle class, and even not quite middle class, that do not have available money, people are not buying as many things, and therefore it depresses the economy. And how do we get corporations to get past this? I want to pull every dime, drop of blood and every dime out of my workers that I possibly can, and get them to start thinking of healthy workers means people will have money to buy things.
Right. It's not the major answer. It's the secondary answer in terms of solution to the economy. We have to have proper recirculation. I think the problem is in the business world, and I always talk business because I'm a businessman, is that if you, and let's talk the United States, okay? I as a shareholder want to make as much money as I can, and I'm managing my firm to do that, okay? And I'm doing it on a global basis. So let's take Tennessee and Illinois or Detroit, okay? So Detroit, it's $20 an hour, and I'm making these up, I don't know exactly. And in Tennessee, it's $10 an hour. I shouldn't be allowed to compete on a geographical basis, and in some cases a global basis, on that difference. And the only thing that can come from is three things. some sort of federal government regulation or global regulation, labor unions, and minimum wage legislation. We've already seen it.
But
Okay?
let's think of some place like Walmart.
Same thing with Walmart.
Where they have decreased their health care again, and the Walmart, the family seems to have way more money than they could possibly need, and yet they keep trying to squeeze everything they can. Oh, by the way, they have solar. They're very big on solar because they know solar will make them money.
Yes, of course. And you know, the only way to do that is, and this is where I disagree with the Republican legislation, is have some form of minimum wage, labor representation, or some form of other regulation where people do not compete, especially on a geographical reason, do not compete on basic wages and fringe benefits. Now I'm going to go liberal on Tony. Okay, because I want you to go, when you go to the website, go read Inequality and Solutions. I hate that I'm going to go way out on you guys. Jobs are over. There ain't no more jobs. We got the robots coming, 3D printing and biomanufacturing. It's not going to hit us first. It's going to hit, believe it or not, Asia first and the low wage things. I just saw a picture the other day in the National Geographic. I saw a robotic caretaker, medical caretaker, taking care of a monk in Thailand. We have 2 robotic systems that are replacing the Mexican workers in the Imperial Valley. We have Baxter coming. What's Baxter? He's a $22,000 robot, okay, that works next to people, which most robots don't, and they're friendly, costs $4 an hour, including the $22,000, doesn't go on vacation and doesn't go to human resources, and he works on the assembly line, and he's just started. And you know, with technology, they get better and better every year. So manufacturing jobs go away. So how are we going to play? We have 2 billion people on this globe that are either subsistence unemployed or subsistence farmers. And you see what's happening in China. What happened to us in the Industrial Revolution, we had 90% of our people growing food, now it's 2. And that's happening, it's going to be happening in industrial. So what are we going to do with all these people? Okay, the answer is with money, okay? Because in services, we're going to be growing and doing music and leisure. What about the leisure industry? Won't that help the leisure industry if we move the work week gradually down to 35 hours and hire more people? Okay, it's strictly money. If you know money doesn't cost anything, okay? Now this was in the Economist magazine, which, you know, I was reading it on an airplane and almost pushed the panic button when I read this, because it's not particularly left-wing, is that they think in order to solve this wage situation, we might need to have government subsidies. And I said, I couldn't believe it. Now, here's how we do it. It's pretty simple. As you know, money doesn't cost anything to make. We only have to watch out excess insurance. We have food stamp. What are you going to do with all these people? Put them in concentration camps? We don't need them. We don't, the private system, productive system, does not need these people except as customers. We don't need it to make anything. We got 3D printer, we got Baxter, we got a few engineers, and, you know, we just don't need all these people, but we need them as customers. And that's why we have 2 billion unemployed. So what if I gave 99% of the people all the food stamps to pay most of their food? Give them a little free money stipend for their rent. Pay for their education, not from 5 to 12, but pay for it from 2 to 14. Now look what happens let's look at it from a standpoint of a businessman. I have the government who can afford to do it if they have the right monetary system, gradually, not overnight, paying for these benefits. I can only pay minimum wage. I don't have to pay anything because everything's taken care of. And people who advance and compete above that for wages and more advanced, okay, but at least the inequality is solved because I'm taking care of all these people. They have their health care, which is, I don't know if I mentioned, okay? And so that's where we evolve. That's what I see down the line at the end of the century, because I know we don't need these 2 billion people. What are we going to do with all these people who are coming online? And the 2 billion people are just in 4 countries, which is India, China, Indonesia, and Africa, Africa being a continent. So there are solutions economically, and I become very successful. Will I solve the inequality between me and the person at the bottom? No, and you don't want to do that because that's talking pure utopia. Human beings, we're highly flawed, and we just can't do it. Okay, so there is going to be an inequality, but if everybody's taken care of and they're great customers, and they maybe live in a small apartment versus a mansion. Now the problem is the 1/10 of 1%. Somebody at the bottom of the 1% is nothing in terms of net worth as compared to the top 1 or 2%, 10th of a percent, the top of the 1%. Those are multi-billionaires, and what happens when you have multi-billionaires is you have in England, you have an economic royalty, which is bought Congress, and so it doesn't work economically. It eventually will collapse because you see this some sort of psychology there, and I can't explain it. Maybe it's psychology. These people, their goal is, where am I on the list in the Fortune 400? I mean, how can that possibly be a goal for anybody? You know, I mean, and of course, a lot of people like to make money, and then some people are altruistic. The main reason people are altruistic with these foundations at the billionaire level, state taxes. The state taxes are massively important. Not the amount or the taxation of estate taxes, because you can start it at anywhere, 20 million, 30 million, it's now at 10. Okay? The important thing is to make sure that they put them in foundations or it's recirculated back down. Okay? Their family will be more than taken care of with all the gift exclusions and stuff. I know, because I consult clients. I do a lot of income tax planning and estate tax planning, so I understand the laws. But what happened in England, which eventually collapsed, is what, 4,500 families? That was happening in the turn of the century. 4,500 families in the United States own 99%. You see other examples in El Salvador, where 17 families own 99%, and they think it's a communist revolution down there. With the right and no, they need food. Okay, you don't food. What happens when you don't have food? You, especially in this country, you pick up a gun. Okay, so if things get worse, then you have revolution and evolution, and then society collapse. So you have to have the right economic policy, and everybody gets wealth. We're all in this global together. Everybody gets wealthier and better, and everything goes up. And the smartest, the brightest, and the luckiest. 41% of the people in this country stay in the same income level they're born in. Just to let you know, the mobility is not as fast. These quotes come from the economists. They don't come from, you know, left-wing, way-out things, okay? I only read the Economist and economics. So, next question. I hope that answered it. That's long enough answered, but there's gradual ways of doing it. And the key is, in micro level, we can't compete on wages at the lower level, on the basic level, because those are the people that come into my business. And I know that from practical experience, because my father made an awful lot of money on those dock workers down in Wilmington and those average people. And, you know, he's more liberal than I am because he knows what happens when you circulate. They come right back in because certain people are capitalists, have that certain talent, because we're mostly unequal. Next question. I ran on a little bit on that question. Go ahead.
So, I mean, just to understand your last point correctly, you're saying, so essentially everybody will be covered, you know, in terms of housing, in terms of in food, basic necessities.
Yes.
Like up to a certain point, and then, you know, you'll have the ability to.
Yeah. Can you imagine, as a businessman, I don't have to pay high wages because the government's taking care? So it helps the businessman too.
But with that in mind, I mean, is the American dream dead at that point? I mean, do people have the, like, in this fictional scenario that you've concocted? I mean, like, is there the ability to move upward?
Oh,
like,
yes. Okay. Just to think your ability. Let's say you're an entrepreneur, and a lot of entrepreneurs go on credit card and this and that. But I have your basic living. You're living in a tiny little apartment because that's the basic. I got your food basics. Your health care is okay because you can go to a clinic. And your education was free, okay? Up to maybe 40 grand, whatever, okay? Look at the opportunity you have to make money, but you can't go on you can't buy your own yacht. You can't go on a vacation, okay? You can't have what the 1% and 2%ers have, okay? But if you work for it, you do. So your thing is, will they lose the incentive? And the answer is no, okay? They'll just have just as much incentive to for the goal. Okay, and remember, once they get a certain level, they can't spend it anyway. Okay, Bill Gates is larger than many countries, you know. So you're talking about what do you do about the bum? You always, the right brings up, what about the? I don't care about the bum. Let him be a bum on the beach. We don't need to. There's 2 billion people that are unemployed in this world, and that are coming to work in our factories and our services. We don't need jobs for them because we're so productive in the private arena, good, bad, or indifferent. Okay, we don't need these people. We got robots. Okay, we got machinery. You've seen it already, and it's coming even quicker. With Google, we don't even need a chauffeur anymore. You just get in a Google car. All those what are you going to do with all those chauffeurs out there? I just get in my Google limousine and say, take me to the theater. Okay? And all of a sudden we have, 100, 200,000 taxi drivers unemployed, millions. So jobs are going to be in decline. I didn't mean to get too much way out on you because it's not going to be, I won't be alive when it happens, but that's the gradual thing that you're going to be seeing. But the way to solve it is to solve the monetary system. So Congress can fight over, what they're doing is they're fighting over philosophy of 19th century laissez-faire philosophy with the Democrats on the FDR 20th century philosophy. Instead of researching and reading and creating a 21st century win economy. And that's what they should be doing. And then they should fight, then they can fight over operations, where to spend the money, where to spend the monetary system, infrastructure, educate, let them fight over it, okay? That's what they should have been fighting, but they're fighting over philosophy, so they've got a gridlock, okay? And an excellent book is the end of, for you people on the right, an excellent book is called, written by the Treasury Secretary Reagan, a Republican, The End of Laissez-Faire Economics. It's an excellent book, it's short, it's quick, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll make one statement and then go on to the next question. So that's a very good book to read. It doesn't cover monetary reform as most don't, but it's a very good book. And the outsourcing, everybody outsourcing to Asia, I have two statements. Well, first of all, outsourcing is not trade. They talk about free trade and think outsourcing our jobs to Asia is not trade. I'm not trading them for anything other than cheap labor and losing my customers here, and they can't buy the product. They can't buy the mini-pad. So I read a great comment about the Apple. Okay, this guy calls them the eye slaves, the people that made all the apples in China, at in their dormitories that are surrounded by, and they have nets so they don't jump over and commit suicide. So, and so they broke the cycle. We started borrowing over here in 2008 with all the credit cards and everything because we didn't have money to spend to keep our standard of living up. Okay, and they can't buy the iPad and the tennis shoe, and so in 2008 it just collapsed. Caused, by the way, the collapse in 2008 was not caused by any tax or spending or lack of regulation. If you think the government is smart enough to regulate the financial industry, you got a lot coming. Okay, and it was totally caused by the private monetary financial system in this country. Maybe a little less of regulation caused it to be more severe, but it was caused by the private monetary financial system in this country. It had nothing to do with tax and spend. Same thing in Europe, except in Europe, some of the countries were in surplus, like Ireland and Spain, and the monetary system just collapsed them. And so they have 30, 40, they're in a mess because they got a central bank system that's totally unfunctional. At least here we have some resilience. And I talked a lot of negative sometimes about capitalism, but capitalism, and the definition of capitalism is when production's in private hands, not necessarily, okay, is that we've been very successful because if you look around even the poor neighborhoods, and I know it's gotten worse in the last few years, but if you look around, it's the 40s and 60s, even in the poorer neighborhoods, live a lot better than substantially better than anybody in the time in human history, even in the United States, since World War II, okay? Because the biggest monetary policy that we've ever had, they passed it on the fiscal side, but it was still monetary, was the GI Bill. Gave everybody free education and a cheap loan for a house. That's all it did, and we created a big boom. big boom. Okay, and so it's problems to solve, and they're solvable. There's solutions to them if you know where the money comes from and get in control. And that's why Wall Street's so big, because they can create money. So you see, when they have no restrictions on how much they leverage their bets. You see, oh, this bank lose $10 billion. I know, I've talked to the bankers, okay? They lose $2 billion here or $3 billion here. Well, that means they leveraged up. They can leverage up because they borrow from themselves out of thin air. I want that printing press in my basement. Can you imagine what you can do with a little digital computer that makes money in your basement? That's what they got. Okay, so they merged, when they eliminated Glass-Steagall, they merged the two, and they have unlimited ability to leverage their option trading. That's basically what derivatives are, okay? And so they have these, but they're trading among themselves. It's you know, I come from that industry. I'm licensed and all that stuff, okay? So I understand it pretty well, okay? Now, next question. Are we running out of time?
We're running out of time.
Okay, we'll have, Tony's going to take his questions down here. I will sit here because I'm getting up there. I need to sit down eventually and answer any of their questions. We can just talk about economics. One other point is, they mentioned it. Pick up my card if you want to read my website, but I do salons, which means, be surprised how many people don't know what that is. Living room talks, 12, 15 people for dinner in their living room. We could talk about economics. I have a little presentation for your corporate meeting, I mean your club meetings, any of your meetings. I like to be a guest speaker. I do not charge, okay, whatever you see. So this is what I do for a living. I retired to change the world, and so they would have the proper macroeconomics. And thanks for having me. I want to thank Minerva again. She's been thanked. She did it all, and it's wonderful.